Welcome to Hotline TV, everyone. I'm Amy Walter.
And I am John Mercurio. Remember this television ad, Amy Walter, from last week? Just last week. It feels like it was yesterday.
What Obama says.
It would be unacceptable for executives of these institutions to earn a windfall.
Is not what he does. Meet Jim Johnson, former Fannie Mae CEO. Fannie cooked the books, and Johnson made millions. Then Obama asked him to pick his VP and raised thousands for his campaign. Barack Obama. More empty words.
Well, imagine that. Just 5 days later, 4 days later, we now have the New York Times coming out again with a story saying that, in fact, Rick Davis's company, Davis Manafort, had been paid until very recently $15,000 a month, of course, by Freddie Mac.
Freddie Mac, Fannie Mae. They're all in the same name.
They are indeed.
Whatever.
They're very, very, very confusing.
Very close.
Part of the confusing economic crisis that we face in this country. Let's talk about this, though. The McCAIN campaign then responding to the New York Times only, and we'll get to that, I think an important point.
I agree.
To the New York Times story, attacking the New York Times, comparing it to the liberal blog, the very pro-Obama blog, the Huffington Post. Is this strategy, Amy Walter, in your opinion, working for the McCAIN campaign?
Yeah, it's not really getting that far here. Really what it is, let's go to your first point, which is, didn't Newsweek also write about this today?
And Roll Call.
Yeah,
and I think
all right. So how it's now suddenly the New York Times ganging up on them, that is question number one, which I agree. It's obviously easy, you know, they know that this is an easy hit for their base to go after the New York Times, make it be about the liberal media. I think they've sort of worn out that line of attack.
Right.
The real question here is John McCAIN every day, as does Barack Obama, have to react and respond to a political environment that literally it feels like changes overnight. You know, that one day you're doing this, one day you're doing that. And the McCAIN campaign has a pretty simple premise, which is all we have to do is make this campaign about, you know, who can be the reformer, the maverick, and the outsider. That is hard to do when you spent 26 years in Washington and you surrounded yourself with people who've been in Washington that much time. So he's always going to get caught in that bind in the same way that Barack Obama running as the outsider and the change candidate is always going to get tripped up by what does change mean? Are you really, how are you really,
and
do you have the experience to put that forward?
And is he really the agent of change? Look, I mean, he's talking about changing the approach to the economy. He's still talking about basically an economic team that was the Clinton economic team. And yes, they were more successful, and yes, we had a much more dynamic economy during the 90s, during the Clinton administration, but that is still a challenge, I think, to say that you're bringing fresh new leadership to Washington. Going back to the McCAIN response, Michael Goldfarb, the McCAIN campaign blogger, responding to the New York Times, made several points that were really questionable. He said that the New York Times had never run an investigative or a critical piece on Barack Obama. They ran a huge piece back in the Democratic primary that I think, frankly, changed the dynamics of that campaign, didn't really allow Obama to run as much on the sort of new politics idea that he wanted when the story was about the nuclear waste facility in Illinois and David Axelrod taking campaign contributions. It was a big deal. That's all I have to say about that.
Yeah, so, you're like, so there, ha. But it does go back to this point, which is, where is this race going to be fought? You know, are we going to be spending all of our time talking about the policy piece of this? You know, look, or in terms of the difference. Look, if Barack Obama has to get this campaign back onto the terms he wants to get it to, which this crisis has certainly helped, because people are no longer focusing on this sort of stuff, and they're focusing on, right now, the fundamentals of the economy.
Right.
But when we get into the debates, what is it going to be about?
What they want to do, what I think the McCAIN campaign wants to do with this sort of strategy, this sort of attack on the media, is solidify the base, solidify the conservative base that they have been working really hard on, frankly, with
but
Sarah
they already
Palin,
have those people.
And to reach out. They don't, though. They don't. I don't think have an excited base in the same way that they really need to. No, there's been no successful Republican presidential candidate in the past 50 years who didn't have a 95% enthusiasm rate. I'm making up that number. Enthusiasm rate. I make up a lot of facts on this show, ladies and gentlemen.
It's the concept that counts.
While they reach out to the independents on the reform charge.
Can we talk about that for a minute, too, which is Sarah Palin, can we really expect to see her shielded from the press in this way? I mean, so we have two things. We have the press isn't fair, attack the New York Times, and now Sarah Palin, when you do talk about her, it's sexist. and then when she is in a situation that probably should be covered by the press,
right.
we can't let you cover it.
I actually think that was a bigger story this week, was
too.
shielding Sarah Palin so much from the media, showing her sitting with Hamid Karzai, with Henry Kissinger, with several other sort of global leaders, and not allowing her to talk. It was almost, I think, painting the picture of her as president, if you will, but in a very, very weak way. It made her look, sitting there with somebody who she's actually not allowed to interact with publicly, like somebody who, if she had been president, the country would almost be embarrassed of. It's almost as if you want to put her out there, but not actually allow her to make the point to, to sort of move the message of the McCain campaign, or if she were president of the U.S. government.
Right. It just goes to show, and this is the last thing we can say, that, the McCain campaign, their goal is, let's run out the clock. But 40 days, 40 days is still a very, very long time, especially when voters are just starting to key in. All right, that's all the time we have for today. Until next time, I'm Amy Walter.
And I'm John Mercurio. We'll see you next time on Hotline TV.
You always love the punching.
I do. You got to sort of knock it out of the ballpark.
I'm going to knock you out. Mom says to knock you out. Does that show my age?
Are we on tape?